It's Tuesday, September 17th, 2013, and you're listening to SYN Broly, the podcast of the Sign Your Name Project. I'm Trey Comstock, and with me this week is literally only the lovely Stephen Doss.
Sup, bro?
So a couple programming notes. Kathleen is out this week. Sydney is out. Sydney, who's our producer, and my lovely wife, is out this week. So it is Stephen and I alone in a studio with microphones and an internet connection. So this could
bear with us.
This could be dangerous. I'm both running everything, so there's only gonna be one video position because Sydney does the switching, and she does a great job at it, but not this week.
This is why you always have a producer. No matter how low budget your show is, you find someone to say, I'm more than happy to help you out.
And Sydney is, remarkably professional about it, and this week it's just me. I'm technically executive producer of the website, and I'm having to executively produce tonight.
Everything.
But on this week's show, besides our ramblings, we talk...
It's going to be mainly ramblings. Let's just be honest with ourselves. Kathleen isn't here, and she's very much the person who keeps us on topic. So,
yeah.
But she's out on a date with one of her
idols.
And
Sydney has parent-teacher conference, and Grand Theft Auto 5 came out this week, so look, world's on fire. Also on this week's show, we'll talk about condoms, sodomy, how we were wrong about climate change, religious tolerance, and modern masculinity. But we start tonight with a Catholic archbishop talking about Satan in the news.
And here comes the news theme. There it is. For just two people, we have high production values. Emphasis on it. Send boldly, cat.
I wish I could have taught the cat to run the switcher. So, not to get too much into the particulars of this story, but I'll run down the basics. Minnesota Archbishop John Neested claims that Satan is behind gay marriage, condoms, and pornography. He made this claim last week, or I guess now a couple weeks ago, at a conference at the Napa Institute conference on August 2nd, so almost way over a month ago. But he claimed that based on this kind of importance of the family argument, the devil is behind multiple attempts to weaken the institution of heterosexual marriage. That among those things that are weakening heterosexual, specifically marriage, is fornication. So sodomy, condoms, and pornography. Mm-hmm. Now, the issue of pornography, I think, is one we're going to set aside. Whether you believe in Satan as an entity or not, there's no way to look at porn that is non-exploitative.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
So I mean, I'm not going to sit here and make a strident defense
of pornography based on scripture, because I don't think you can make one.
You can't make that argument, and pornography is a scourge on our culture right now. Whether overt pornography in terms of the porn industry or the subtle pornification of children's television. Look, it's a problem.
Look at flipping Miley Cyrus.
Right, and look at Miley Cyrus and twerking, and you kind of see how far that's gone. So I don't necessarily have the same theology of Satan as he does, but I think our theological views align that, yes, pornography is affecting families and people not in families.
Yeah.
I always take issue with the family-specific language, but you're not going to get a strident defense out of me on that. The two things I do want to talk about is sodomy in the context of gay marriage and condoms. The sodomy issue, it's tricky, right? Because that biblically, sodomy is what gets mentioned, not gay marriage or not committed gay relationships. It talks just about sodomy, which is a way homosexual sex can be described. Now, what did that mean 3,000 years ago versus how does that get used now in the context of a committed and loving relationship is the issue I have. Like, how, to me, I don't see gay marriage, almost regardless of the theological stance on it, I don't see gay marriage as somehow affecting how I view my family. And in many ways, I see it the opposite way as the Archbishop, in that the lack of the ability for gay and lesbian couples to get married somehow makes me feel weird about my own marriage.
Well, I think because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't the Catholic Church say that marriage is a sacrament?
Yes.
So
yes,
then
it
it's
is a
something
sacrament.
set apart for them and their
Mhm.
very specific kind
Yeah.
of people, which are heterosexual males and females, one-on-one in a loving and committed relationship for about 15 years when it becomes unloving, but you can't divorce because you're Catholic. Just kidding. I know plenty of happy Catholic couples. But I think the point is like, if the other people, the people who the quote-unquote sodomites are able to get married, that makes it so that my marriage is worth a little less, because now it's not something set aside for me. It's something for everyone. That's another reason why I would assume, it's a sacrament, because
It's a
yeah.
sacrament, and sacraments are both set aside and cannot be undone.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is also why you end up with the divorce. I found a quote that kind of sums up kind of what we're talking about from the Archbishop. The actual quote is: "Sodomy, abortion, contraception, pornography, the redefinition of marriage, and the denial of the objective truth are just some of the forces threatening the stability of our civilization. The source of these mechanisms is none other than the father of lies. Satan knows all too well the value that the family contributes to the fabric and good of a solid society, as well as the future work of God on earth." So he's directly saying that these things are tools of however you define evil. In this case, he's defining it as Satan, to destroy the family. And two of these in particular, three, I call in question abortion as well, but the Catholic Church is consistent in their stance on abortion.
Yeah.
And also they back it up with money for unwed mothers
Exactly.
and
They say
adoptions.
it's wrong, and they do it right.
I have a lot of disagreements on how the Catholic Church handles sexual and reproductive health, but how they treat women, teenage mothers with pregnancy, during their pregnancy is admirable. And,
very much so.
And so we're talking here about sodomy and contraception. But the sodomy piece, when you say it as sodomy
automatically has negative connotations. I mean, think of where the word came from. Sodom.
Right, Sodom.
Yeah. Even though that was the sin of inhospitality, but that's beside the point.
But it's a word that comes out of there. It's
a negative connotation. So anything you say and you call it something with that negative connotation, you're going to automatically demonize it. You could say, kittens are sodomy. They're not really.
Right.
But it's just...
The biology of kittens...
biology of kittens is not sodomaic.
But it's using a deliberately provocative word.
A deliberately provocative word. And it's, in fact, the Supreme Court, about, a decade or ago, struck down sodomy laws.
It was during the Bush administration.
Yeah.
It was specifically a case about Texas. My home state.
Yeehaw.
It was one of those really scary days in the Supreme Court where they struck down sodomy laws and they struck down assault weapon bans on the same day.
Yep.
And there was some weird part of me that was like, oh, God. God help us all. When you use that word, it's deliberately provocative language. There are plenty of provocative words that we can use for heterosexual sex that I would have to bleep out, and so I'm not going to. But we have plenty of words based on the Anglo-Saxon that we consider crass to refer to heterosexual lovemaking.
Yeah.
And so when you say sodomy, it creates this instantly sinful word. But when you talk about lovemaking between a committed, married, or life-committed partnership of two consenting and loving adults, I just think we're in a different place.
The language, like if you watch TV, you'll hear heterosexual sex called making love, all that stuff. And when it comes to the other side, it's always like gay sex or other things that are a bit too crass for me to say on here. But I mean, just in the way they're represented in pop culture, you never hear about a loving, committed homosexual relationship where they make love.
Yeah, and it's somewhat that kind of stereotype of the slutty gay man.
Exactly.
Right, that there's this slutty man, promiscuous gay man. It is this idea in culture that all gay men are just running around having random sex with other...
Well, that's the reason that they're going to destroy heterosexual marriage, is because, you leave your window open, next thing you know, pop, there's a gay man in there.
Right, and so... look, there are promiscuous gay men, just like there are promiscuous straight men
too.
There are promiscuous all types of people.
Yeah.
That's not the point, but there's the stereotype that that's what all gay men are. That all gay men are super flamboyant. Some are, absolutely.
Yeah.
Some straight men are super flamboyant. Deal with it. But there is this image of the slutty, promiscuous, run around, have sex gay man, and so when you use sodomy, you think of that is this kind of slutty, sinful thing. But when you're talking about a committed relationship, how can I say that a gay couple's any more or less committed than Sydney and I are? What gives me the right to draw that line?
Right.
I know gay relationships, some of which have been confirmed in marriage, that have lasted 30, 40 years. I walked the Camino de Santiago with the cutest middle-aged gay couple you've ever met. Shout out to Tom and George. I just don't get it. I don't... Okay, I understand why he uses that word. It's deliberately provocative. But I don't think it's an appropriate word to use at this point in time.
Yeah.
Because there can be gay men or lesbians who are building a family.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And so how is that going to be bad for a family? I have a man I'm relatively close to who's raising his two sons. And they seem happy and wonderful and all of that. And in this day and age, I shouldn't have to issue those clarifiers. They have good parents.
Yeah.
Who cares? Right? And so that, to me, that's building a family rather than tearing one down. Do I think that promiscuity has effect on family, especially when it's expressed as infidelity? Absolutely.
Definitely. But that's it.
But that's been true for time immemorial.
Yeah, that's not just because a couple happens to be the same gender or the same sex. That's because people are sinful.
Sin exists. Sin is real. And
how,
and Archbishop would probably define it as Satan, and that's certainly a historically appropriate way of talking about that. Oddly enough, he doesn't mention, at least in the list I'm looking at here, doesn't mention cheating.
Yeah, infidelity is apparently okay.
It's not okay, but not coming to mind, which I think is very telling.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to talk about is contraception.
Okay.
And look, the Catholic Church is very consistent on this.
Yeah.
And so I don't mean this to be a debate about the Catholic Church's position on contraception. I disagree with it. I also relatively understand it. But it's not my place to understand it or not.
Yeah.
I think it
not
does.
Catholic. Yeah.
I think it does have an impact in the international relief field. When you have way overpopulated countries, and then you preach don't use contraception, and then where do you end up?
And they continue to be more overpopulated.
And children are dying, and it's a mess. That's not what he's talking about here, and that's not real. I don't want to stray into that because I disagree, and this is going to have to be something historically me and the Catholic Church, because I have a lot of conversations with the Catholic Church.
The whole Catholic Church.
The whole Catholic Church and nothing but the Catholic Church. But also 93% or 90-something% of Catholic women in America use contraception.
Yeah.
So there's clearly a dichotomy and a voice of dissent even within the church about this. And given that statistic, which isn't made up, you can get it off of Guttmacher Institute, which is an institute for reproductive health, and they track these kind of things. It's been a while since I looked at the exact statistic, but it's 90-something% of American Catholic women actively use some form of contraception, modern contraception, not rhythm and all of that. So can you really say that contraception is ruining families or having a negative impact on families?
You can when it makes it look like your church is shrinking because of birth rates. I mean, as the only justification I can give for that is to say, there's a movement in some churches called Quiverful. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the biggest, the best known example of the Quiverful movement is the Duggar family. They're not
From
Catholic.
400 kids and
19 kids and counting, which happens to be one of my favorite shows.
Kids.
Actually, it's kind of embarrassing, but I love Jackson Duggar. I like that show, but they are part of the Quiverful movement, and I don't recommend exporting that to the continent of Africa.
No, but I mean, when you can have a philosophy that says that in order to be a good Christian, you need to have children so that you can raise them up in the faith to defeat Satan, to defeat the ills of the world,
well,
then contraception is definitely a bad thing.
And if you define sex as solely for the purpose
procreation,
which I understand to be the Catholic position on this, then it is theologically consistent. But I disagree, and certainly to call it out in such a way as one of the ills that's destroying the family, considering when so many of your own adherents are practicing some form of modern contraception.
Right.
I think there are bigger things. I guess fundamentally what I disagree with is the list. Some of the lists are theologies of the Catholic Church that I disagree with, and I connect a lot with many aspects of the Catholic Church, including a lot of Catholic spirituality. Is a great deep meaning for me.
Read Catholic Social Thought. Read Vatican II. It's
right. I mean,
it's wonderful about workers' rights and
I've walked the Camino de Santiago twice, and I'm planning another walk on it. So, like, this is not me on an anti-Catholic rant.
No, but it's just when someone in your church, and if the Methodists do this, we definitely will call them out, and Bishop Eddie Fox, and another story,
alumni of the year or whatever.
Yeah, I should have won that. It's all politics.
Next year.
Actually is all politics. Anywho, but when you make a list and saying these are the ills that are destroying the family, and you don't put in, like, I mean, let's be honest, addiction. Yeah. Gambling addiction, alcoholism, drug addiction.
Domestic
violence. No. Infidelity. No, that's only what, those people do. That's, Kathleen a few shows ago put it best. That's not my sin.
Yeah, and these are, these are the headline grabbers. These are the ones that, you can go on a crusade about. But if you go on a crusade about infidelity, you're going to hit real close to home.
Yeah. Like,
or if you go on a crusade about domestic violence, you're going to hit real close to home. Addiction. There are addicted people in every congregation in this country.
And it doesn't matter what they're addicted to. They're addicted.
And it could even be an addiction to pornography.
Yeah.
Which is, which is a very real addiction for some people. But these are not, if you think Satan is combating on a war against the family, and his theology leaves plenty of room for that.
Yeah.
These are not, I wouldn't have these as my top
Your
5.
top lists.
No. This is not, how two gay men or how two lesbians approach each other is not destroying my family. In fact, we're trying to destroy theirs by the positions that get taken.
Yeah.
This is not, contraception is certainly making families smaller. Yes, absolutely.
But it's also making families sustainable.
And also giving women some choice.
Yeah.
Over when they want to be pregnant.
Right.
And letting, more work outside the home be done by women. And there's any number of consequences of smaller family size. And so this is just, this hits some really great bullet points on some spreadsheet of what you have to talk about as talking points, but I just don't, like, if you think these are problems, okay, that's your theology. I disagree, but I still think, regardless of what your theology is, even if that is your theology, I don't think...
There's still bigger stuff to take care of.
Right, that are going to be more getting at what is affecting American families. I don't deny, like, there are many strains being put on American families. The biggest one being the economy.
Yeah.
And the unjust distribution of wealth.
Yeah. I mean, just recently, 95% of income gains were with to use the buzzword, the top 1%. Which means, yes, the economy's getting better, but not for families that are going to use contraception because they can't afford a child now.
To be honest, and to pull this on a personal level, that's one of the reasons why Sydney and I have been married for 4 years and don't have any children. It's because, quite simply, we can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to be responsible for our children such that we won't have children until we can afford it.
Yeah.
And that may be a while.
That's a downright
and
logical thought.
And so, you know what's holding back my family? It's the economy.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't, what two committed people are doing in privacy of their own homes. Yeah. I don't know. So, we're wrong about climate change, Stephen?
Oh, yes. Oh, sorry. Hold on. I need my drink. With that awesome segue, welcome to the lounge. My name's Steven. How are you doing today?
Hello,
you look
Steven.
Wonderful.
I know.
So, according to the Telegraph, and by according to the Telegraph, I mean the newspaper in London. Yes, that's what all English people sound like.
You have to do it with the Cockney accent. There we go.
Well, anyway, a study has come out, and prior to this year, there was this huge hubbub in the environmentalist world in which they were saying that the North Pole, the North Polar ice cap, the Arctic, was going to melt away, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. The damage had already been done. Well, on behalf of liberals everywhere, I just want to say, whoops, my bad. Because apparently, according to this article, the North Polar ice cap has actually grown by 60%. So,
whoops.
Humvees, keep on trucking.
Keep on trucking.
Let's go ahead and not go solar, wind, nuclear.
Can I get my Suburban back?
Yes, you should. If you own a Prius, congratulations. It's worthless now. And we should just give up with trying to protect the environment because, well, looks like it's doing fine. So what as a Christian, who is charged with being a caretaker of God's creation, and I guess we can go back to the very, very literal definition of holding dominion over it and just do what we want. So I'm going to go club a seal with an even cuter baby seal right now.
Well, you could do that. You can do that anyways. That's not going to affect the climate.
And then burn it.
There we go. Yes. With aerosols.
Aerosol spray fire.
So I'm actually just going to go down to the hardware store, buy 2 cans of spray paint, and just spray them everywhere?
Yeah, I guess we're done.
We're done? Okay. I don't think we're done, Stephen.
What do you mean? But the ice caps, they're better.
That is one metric, right?
Yeah.
That's one metric for the state of climate change.
Mm-hmm.
We do know that it's not global warming. I think part of the problem here is an issue of messaging, right?
Yeah.
It got pitched as global warming because that's going to be the general trend.
It's like sodomy. It's a buzzword that automatically brings a negative connotation. In this sense, global warming. Global warming.
But what it really is global climate change.
Mm-hmm.
So the climate is changing. And one of the predictions was that the global climate change will probably end up in an ice age. That we're in a period in our climate where it tends towards ice age anyways. There have been a bunch, and we're, in terms of geologic time, in a very short interlude in between what might be another ice age.
Mm-hmm.
And that global climate change, although right now it expresses itself as a warming trend, we don't know what the long-term effects of that are, and what it could do is it could speed a new ice age.
Mm-hmm.
But either way, it means that we're dumping these chemicals into the system such that the system becomes more unpredictable. So you have more powerful storms, or you have a shift in the Gulf Stream, which could really screw up Northern Europe.
Yeah.
Or you have all of these things, unpredictable, crazy El Nino events. It's climate change, right? Not the end of predictable weather, which predictable weather is really what you want. Our whole agricultural system is based on the idea of predictable weather.
I mean, the Farmer's Almanac produced every year is 80% accurate when it comes to forecasting the weather because it's predictable.
Right.
You know that it's going to be hot in the summer, it's going to be cold in the winter.
And if you have this kind of summer, you're going to have this kind of winter because of the moisture that's in the system.
Yep. It's like it's a rainy summer. Well, it's going to probably be a dry winter then, or however it goes. I'm
not a farmer, though my congregation is, and I can talk to them. They'll know.
That actually would be interesting as to what would happen.
We'll find out. But with climate change, the system's becoming crazy. Yep. And so it allows for the ice caps to build. This isn't actually about what as Jeremy Clarkson from Top Gear always dismissively says, Johnny Polar Bear. Yeah. This isn't, a polar bear rights campaign. What this is there's still a problem with how we are tending creation. Mm-hmm. Right? And to pull this back to kind of a more biblical idea, by dumping all these chemicals that we don't know what they're really doing, or we know that it seems to be a net negative, even if you can't pin down predict exact effects, it's a really large system with a whole ton of variables. Mm-hmm. You can't necessarily predict what it's going to do. We're not caring for creation.
Right.
We have been tasked with it. It is a gift from God, and we're not caring for it.
And I think as a faithful people, we are called to care for it, mm-hmm. not because if we don't, bad things will happen. We're called to care for it because we're called to care for it. It's like saying, well, I'm only going to give money to the church if they do what I want to do, or if they will prevent me from going to this very, very bad place. That's the only reason.
Gehenna.
To the
fires.
The fires, yes. Sorry, my biblical Hebrew is losing me. But we're very reactionary as a creature, as a creation. We're very much like, we're only going to react when it affects me and when it's a negative effect. And as creatures called by God to take care of everything that God has created, that's kind of not the best mentality to have, don't you think?
Well, I think it's kind of the issue like we talked about with condoms. We as a species are just bad at prevention. Mm-hmm. Prevention is really difficult, right? So I went to my doctor about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And like my triglycerides were, I'll put this on air, whatever. My triglycerides were like 300, which is like huge. My cholesterol was too high. I was obese in terms of the BMI scale, because I wasn't doing anything preventative.
Yeah.
And so I was on a fast track to heart disease. Now I've been on Weight Watchers for 18 months, and I've dropped like a lot of weight, like 50 pounds. And so like I finally took prevention seriously. But we have this obesity epidemic in the United States because prevention is hard.
Yes, it is.
And prevention is because you don't necessarily see the benefit of something when something doesn't happen.
Right.
We prevented it from happening. How many did you prevent? I don't know. How many were there going to be? I don't know. Mm-hmm. But in a world that was hit by Hurricane Sandy, that was hit by Hurricane Katrina, like Hurricane Rita, like these are storms that hit very close to home. Climate change is a part of that, y'all. You're seeing it. So you want to know what you're preventing? You're preventing those. Yeah. Can I tell you how many named storms you'll prevent by not, buying an SUV? No, I can't. It's not that simple.
You're right.
But it's about a spirit of caring for something rather than just saying, oh, this doesn't affect me. If you ever think, oh, this doesn't affect me, that's a pretty good chance that what you're thinking is not of God.
Yeah.
Because we are in this idea of Christian community and in this idea of being the body of Christ, we are fundamentally tied to one another.
Sin Boldly Cat disagrees with you.
And so there's no such thing as being fundamentally, it doesn't affect me. Mm-hmm. What affects the body affects the one, right? There's a great quote, I think it's an African theologian by the name of Esther Mambo. I really shouldn't quote it because I don't remember, but it's that the body of Christ has AIDS. Think about that. The body of Christ has AIDS. that if one member of the body, or a large number of the member of the body, has Christ, we all have AIDS. Because the body of Christ has AIDS. We are all tied in. No man is an island alone unto himself. Right? Meditation 19. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
John Donne, Meditation 19. So...
He's in one of my English literature books.
It's one of my quotes on Facebook. It's one of my quotes I put in my senior yearbook. Because I'm that cool. But that quote really hits me.
Yes, Cavalier poets are the coolest.
Look, okay, it's deeply...
Hey, I love my Robbie Burns.
Robbie Burns.
My Ben Johnson.
The best laid plans of mice and men aft gang a glay. Hey, I hit my stride on that one.
That was
yes.
nice. That was much better than your Joel Osteen impersonation.
Well, I am Scottish. It ought to be better, laddie.
I'm from Alabama, so...
I'm from Texas. My family's from Scotland.
Crikey.
Crikey.
Anyway.
But at no point are we as Christians disconnected from our brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Either those who have already become part of the Christian family, or those who are still outside the fold. They are all our brothers and sisters. We are all connected. Mm-hmm. If it affects one part of the body, the whole body is affected. And so there are increased droughts that are causing people to starve. Yeah. That affects us, not directly, but in Christ.
But what if it turns out that we can't prevent them? That it's all, for lack of a better word, it's all a natural process. I mean, like this year, we have had one of the lowest hurricane seasons ever.
Yeah, but that's after years of hugely active seasons. I'm a Gulf Coast kid.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I track these things even though I no longer live there. You know, we had Superstorm Sandy last year in the winter. And it was a named storm. And now, okay, they're doing really dumb things and they're just naming winter storms now, too. We also had Superstorm Draco. But Superstorm Sandy is actually a named hurricane that happened, and then combined with a blizzard and just went crazy. So yeah, okay, right now, and like we had a really warm winter either last year or a couple years back, and The Daily Show ran this hilarious thing because it was during a House debate on climate change, and so there's this joke, oh, climate change is over, John. No, just because periodically it's not always falling apart doesn't mean the trend is towards something we don't like. I had something pointed out in the chat that we'll close this discussion with, bringing up the idea of Noah's flood as an idea for climate change, as connection to climate change. And there is this connection, right, that, you know, the earth wasn't being cared for. Care wasn't happening in the way it should. And so this disaster happened. And I don't want to drag this out too further because I'm literally thinking this off the top of my head. But I really appreciate that being brought up, that there is this kind of biblical idea that sometimes traumatic climate events happen, and it's not good, and we should do things to prevent them. Speaking of things that we should probably try to prevent, I'm just going to read this headline, and it doesn't need a whole lot more explanation from there. Pastor Terry Jones arrested with a truck full of 3,000 kerosene-soaked Qurans on September 11th.
Oh, goodness.
So, for those of you who are thankfully not up on the inner workings of Pastor Terry Jones is a pastor in Florida.
He's an idiot.
Also that. Who periodically tries to burn Qurans as a statement of intolerance towards Islam. And I don't throw this around lightly. This one's crazy, y'all. Like, yeah. So what he wanted to do is he wanted to burn 3,000 kerosene-soaked Qurans on September 11th in a public park as a protest that somehow Islam and the holy book of Islam is responsible for a terrorist attack that killed thousands. Now, let's be clear. I understand facts, right? And that there are some Muslims who are terrorists, just as there are some Christian who are Klansmen and some people who are jerks.
Yes.
Okay? So yes, there are some Muslims that commit violent events. There are many Christians that commit violent events.
Exactly.
Like Terry Jones. Okay? So, yes, I understand that. But Islam as a religion and the holy book of Islam did not commit an act of terror.
No.
Rogue people abusing the name of Islam committed an act of terror. Many acts of terror.
Yes.
That killed many thousands of Americans. And look, that was a tremendous tragedy, and we'll all remember where we were on that day. And I was on my way from study hall into Spanish class, into Spanish 2, my freshman year of high school. And I had heard some rumblings at school that something was going on, but only the first tower had been hit. And then as I was walking to second period, the plane hit the second tower. And my friend Jesse ran up to me and said, "Trey, you need to come here and you should probably see this." And then we watched the news the rest of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really mad that my director didn't cancel rehearsal, because how were we supposed to act out 12 Angry Men with all of this going on?
Mm-hmm.
And, I'll never... It's been 12 years, and I still remember the pain I felt that day. My aunt worked at that time in Washington, D.C., and we couldn't get a hold of her, and we didn't know where she was. My dad was at a NASA facility. He was at Cape Canaveral.
Mm-hmm.
I still have his ID from that day, Cape Canaveral, to September 11, 2001. And, we were able to get a hold of me, talked about the helicopter gunships that were circling Cape Canaveral.
Right.
So, look, I don't want to dismiss the tragedy of that event, but it was not Islam that did that. It was really terrible people who claim the religion of Islam.
Exactly.
And that's an entirely different thing. And so, I am not a Muslim, I am a Christian, but I have, great love for our Muslim brothers and sisters. And anytime someone's holy book is going to be burned is a travesty, undeserving of the role of pastor.
Yes. It's downright shameful. I mean, the thing is, this is something that is just, it's inhumane.
Mm-hmm.
To say that your entire belief structure is wrong, and not because of any rational thought, not because of any, legitimate debate, and I'm going to do something super disrespectful to call yourself not only a follower of Christ, and to say that, but to call yourself a pastor of Christ, someone who is called to lead people into a world of love and respect and tolerance for all people, Jew and Gentile, Samaritan and Pharisee, Christian,
Look,
Muslim,
and the Judeans
Jewish.
and the Judeans and the Samaritans did not get along.
No, they didn't.
This was not
But it's so much easier to say, well, if one person does it, they all do it. It's stereotypes. This is a stereotype to the nth degree.
Well, this is taking something that is beautiful.
Yeah.
And even if it's not your holy book, it's a thing of beauty.
And let's be honest, if you want to say that this book causes violence, look at the Bible, the Old Testament.
Look at how the Bible has been used throughout history, right? And let's trace terror all the way back.
Right.
What are some of the first incursions between Christians and Muslims, right? It's the Crusades.
We had to take back the Holy Land.
What holy book was being used for those acts of violence, ladies and gentlemen? The Bible.
Yes. When placed in the hands of
madmen. Not the Great Show, but madmen.
Placed in the hand of John Hamm, it's
a beautiful
thing. It's a wonderful thing. But placed in the hands of people like Terry Jones, like Osama bin Laden, those books, like the Quran, has beautiful poetry, just like the Hebrew Bible.
And the beautiful statement of peace and love and calling a community to care for people. Right? This is
what book does that too? The Bible.
The New and the Old
The New
Testament.
and the Old Testament. All the prophets are about take care of each other.
And take care of those who are left out. And there's violence in the Bible. And you can use... And there's... I always bring this up, and anytime we discuss this, because it really impacted me. West Wing, the show on NBC from back in the day,
wing
did a special episode, their first episode back after 9/11. If you guys remember, television basically shut down after 9/11. It was all news for a long time. And, like, shows didn't start their seasons, and sports took time. Like, everything shut down for a while. And then slowly things came back online.
I think the first show that was shown after 9/11 was WWF SmackDown.
Yeah, because that's therapeutic, man.
You need to see...
Yeah, just random X amounts. But the West Wing aired this special that they clearly had cut together in the wake of the attack. And Josh Lyman, who's a character I identify anyways, wrote this on the chalkboard. Islam is to terrorism as blank is to Christianity. And the answer is the Ku Klux Klan. Right? The Ku Klux Klan is a terrorist organization that uses the Bible to justify acts totally outside of how the Bible calls us to be.
Yes.
This is the same way that Al-Qaeda operates.
Right.
They take vaguely Muslim principles and then act in such a way outside of the call of the Quran.
Yes.
Which they believe to be the literal word of God.
Yes.
Transcribed directly. Okay? And then that's a very key, as I understand it, I am not a Muslim scholar, that is one of the key, like a key piece of Muslim theology.
Mm-hmm.
And so to totally abuse it in that way, that's a human rights abuse. That is abhorrent.
Yeah.
It actually makes me quite mad.
Well, that's a very good way to transition, because madness and anger
are very masculine.
Are very manly.
Which is this week's discussion.
The discussion song, baby. It's not real long. La la. It did not work at all.
So, as this is the first ever SYN Broly.
SYN Broly.
SYN Broly.
Throwing it up bro style.
The All Dudes podcast by the Sign Your Name Project. We thought we'd talk about the idea of masculinity.
Yes.
Partly as a follow-up to our discussion last week where we talked about gender and gender-inclusive language.
Yeah.
And to focus more on this idea of masculinity from two men. So Stephen, where are you going with this?
I don't have to say anything because I'm a man. I'm wrong, and I'm belligerent about it. No, it's just it's something that's always been on the back of my mind. Because, well, let's be honest. When you see a 5'10", 155-pound guy who has long, scraggly hair, which, yes, I will cut at some point, who enjoys being in musical theater, who likes reading, who is respectful towards everyone. Is that really manly?
It's not really how traditionally... it's not traditional American masculinity.
Yeah, and so what I wanted to discuss today in the last few minutes that we have is just, why is it so wrong in some people's eyes, especially, and let's be honest, especially in some churches' eyes, when you don't fall into those gender norms where women are supposed to care for children and do this and that because it's the motherly, the feminine role, whereas men need to be leaders and men need to be upfront and do very masculine things and punch beef, while women say, you can't do it, rock, and then you punch the meat, and then you go to Russia and you beat Drago. Ivan Drago. He says, and then you finally bring together communists and Americans all because of one fight. That's masculinity, right? That's what being a man is.
Wow, that just happened. Okay.
So traditional gender roles, are they a good thing? Are they a bad thing? And
good and bad. It's interesting. I just, up at my church this weekend, we had a chicken queue, which is, we cooked like 400 chickens in a day and sold them as a fundraiser and an outreach to the community, and it was very successful. My congregation did a wonderful job with it, but it was very interesting. The men worked the grill. The women sat inside and prepared the fellowship hall. Now, everything got done. It was very orderly, and there was an organization to the process, and it was great, and everyone got to feel a part. But there was this very clearly defined gender role, right? And so Sydney worked inside with the women, and I stood outside on the grill. I have no experience grilling. I found a job I could do. I got the spray bottle, and my job was to spray down the chickens periodically, and that was great. And I got
you don't want them to be overcooked.
Right. So, like, I found a job that I could do. But normally, I would have rather been at the theater, right? Okay? Yeah. I would have rather been at the theater. I would have rather been painting or something. That's not normally what I do. I'm probably the only male in my congregation that doesn't hunt for fun. It's not that I have a problem with hunting. I just don't think it's fun.
Yeah, I've never went hunting before. I grew up in Alabama, where every weekend, you've had people come to school with their gun in the back of their truck because they're went hunting.
I mean, I'm from Texas, same idea, right? And I've always been caught up in this thing, right? That I don't like how masculinity gets expressed, and I don't necessarily even like how it gets expressed in the church.
Yeah.
And the church, to be fair, often does a good job of pulling out the positive aspects of masculinity, calling men to be good fathers. Okay, great.
That's a positive.
That's a positive. But it still sets up, but when we say be good fathers, there are things coded in that. Are fathers the one who stay home and take care of the kids?
No, be a good provider.
The mothers. Fathers are provided. I'm a crap provider. Okay?
Yeah.
I make less than my wife. I have for the majority of our marriage at this point. Okay? The majority of our relationships, Sydney has men more than I.
Right.
I'm the one
we start getting big donors for the Sign Your Name project.
Right,
if you plan on donating,
I'm the one who mostly works from home.
Yeah.
So at this stage in life, if we were to have a kid tomorrow or 9 months from tomorrow, I would be the one that cared for the kid.
Yeah.
Now, am I being a good father? I would argue I would be being a good parent, but I wouldn't.
But as a good father, no, you wouldn't, because father has these implications. You are the hunter.
Yes.
You have to go out and hunt for, money nowadays, so that you can provide food for the gatherer. So
and that's fine for people who feel they fit into that role, right? Yeah. Like my dad's big into being a provider and big into providing fatherly advice, and that worked, right? Yeah. And so I had this great father in my life who was very much in the role of a father, and he likes to cook things, but it's mostly cooked meat. Okay, and he cooks it very well, and so he fits in that role. But I don't feel like I fit into that role, yet I still think of myself as a man.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about gender in the church, and we talk about being a good parent, or these positive aspects of masculinity we call folks to, because I don't think the church, I think it's advertising and general culture that's creating the kind of grunting, stupid American male who's just overweight and drinks all the beer he can and doesn't really care what his wife says. She's just a shrew who, nags him all the time, and it's all really funny. If you get bored, or actually even if you don't get bored, look up Target Women on YouTube. It's videos by Sarah Haskins from Current TV from a few years back.
I remember watching those on
But it talks a lot. Yeah. They're all available on YouTube, and they're hysterical. And a lot of them talk about how gender roles get messed up, both how male and female gender roles get messed up. And that, men have to be these hulking, grunting, insensitive idiots. And where it starts, I know plenty of men that are like that, and I know plenty of men that aren't.
Yeah.
And so that's not really what bothers me. But some of it bothers me when, men now statistically take education less seriously.
Right, because
it's considered feminine.
It's a feminine thing.
And so you end up with, it's great that now there are more, in a way, it's great that there are now more women than men in college, except for one thing. That statistically speaking, it's roughly equal.
Yeah.
It should be roughly equal. It should be 50-50 across the board. And if you drag it all the way out, it's mostly 60-40. And if you're in public health school, it's 90-10.
Yeah. Definitely. And that's when that starts happening, men get the idea that this isn't for me anymore, because in order for me to be a man, I can't be seen in a place that's majority feminine. And it's the same thing with the church. I happen to work in children's ministries.
Oh, how shocking.
Yes.
But you're a man, Stephen.
But I'm the only man in the two churches that I've worked and volunteered at here in Atlanta. I've been the only man working with children, because that's what I feel God has called me to do, is to be a masculine presence in a very non-masculine, non-male dominated, not masculine, male. A male presence in a very female dominated part of the church.
Don't look at me. I taught middle school and am getting a degree in public health.
Yeah.
Right? Like, Teach for America is majority women by a huge percentage, and so is public health. So, like, theology is, like, one of the few places where it's like, whoa, there are a lot of dudes around here. This is weird.
The problem comes when we are detrimental to those who feel called to a predominantly other-gendered area of work, church, family life.
Well, yeah, and that gets really weird when you look at the orders of ordination, right? So in the United Methodist Church, which is what Stephen and I are most familiar with, there are two ordained orders. There's deacon and then there's elder. Okay, deacons are called to word and service. And there's other language there too, but the basic idea is they're called to do those jobs that you don't think of as, they're actually pastors, but they're like music ministers, or they run the social justice program, that they're out in the world and they're doing amazing things, okay? And then elders are called to word preaching, order, which is running a church, and then table, which is communion. The sacraments, okay? There are very few male deacons, because elder has been ascribed to a male role, and deacon is often viewed as the more female order. And so technically they're equal. There is not a hierarchy of orders, but you wouldn't know it the way it gets talked about.
Right.
And so what happens to a man who wants to be a deacon, or in Kathleen's case, and I'll speak for her because she's out partying, what happens when there's a female who wants to take on what's thought of the traditional male role? Both times they face an unfair uphill battle.
Right. And a lot of times one of the questions you'll be asked is, so why not the other one? Why not deacon?
Right.
Why not elder?
Right. You're a man. I actually have a friend of mine this happened to. You're a man. Why not elder? Feels called to be a deacon. Deal with it.
Yeah.
Like, these gender roles shouldn't be binding. They're guidelines. They're a suggestion. In reality, they're a spectrum.
Exactly. And
gender's on a spectrum. And while I consider myself a male, I do things that are on the what we think of as a more feminine role, right? I do a lot of the housework, or try to, and I love art and the theater, and I'm not really good at crafts, but I like going antiquing, and I can name you the type of the type of interior design I like. Modern industrial. Like I can do all that. I design,
and I can't.
And I did a lot of the design work for our wedding, right? And I loved that, of just thinking through the service, and how is it going to look, and how is that design going to go, and what outfits should we do, and is this dress going to work with this? Like, I love all of that.
And I chose a wedding date close to Christmas so we wouldn't have to deal with decorations.
Right. But that doesn't make you more of a man than I. It just means that how we choose to live is different.
Yeah.
And this gender roles thing, particularly in the church, when there is theoretically no hierarchy. You can argue the norms of society all day long, but we're supposed to be a voice into a society,
right? Not
merely going along with what's easy.
Yeah. I have a T-shirt from when I worked at Alabama Rural Ministry that says, "Not of this world," and that's designed to get us to understand that as a church, we are in the world. We are called to be in the world. There's no getting around that. However, the problem comes when we start to mirror that. We start to mirror that based on gender roles, based on politics, based on all sorts of stuff that the kingdom of God is not going to be like.
Yeah.
There's going to, it says in the Bible, there will be no male nor female, Jew nor Gentile,
Yeah.
all that good stuff. So gender roles as a social construct are there, but they shouldn't decide who we are as people, because no one should ever be ashamed because they do something ladylike, or or you're just being too manly.
Yeah. I hate football. I love acting.
I love football. I love acting. Speaking of which, you can come see me at Northside United Methodist Church, November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, in your good band, Charlie Brown.
Yeah. And on that shameless plug.
It was very shameless.
We'll
wait.
Yeah?
There's one more thing.
Okay.
We're not going to put a link on, but go to YouTube, search. It's a show called That Mitchell and Webb Look, and there's a sketch that basically identifies like the media's perception of men and women. Look for man-female sketch. You'll know it when you see it, but it's hilarious. Once I find it, I'll have a link up on the Facebook page.
And on that note, thank you so much for joining us. If you ever want to catch us live, we record at roughly 8 p.m.
Or 8:10.
8:10 this week. We had some technical issues, but we're available live at around 8 o'clock 8 o'clock Eastern on Tuesday nights at nfear.org/live. As ever, the podcast is available on demand via iTunes or via the nfear.org website. If you have any feedback or suggestions for topics that you would like to see in future episodes, you can get in touch with us at SYN Boldly at nfear.org is the email, at SYN Boldly on Twitters, or facebook.com/the Sign Your Name Project. And on that, go in peace to love and serve the Lord, and end fear by signing your name.
Good night, folks. I don't, but that's okay. It's going on right now. I forgot. Here comes Sid Bully Cat. Yeah. No, I don't hear the outro. What do you think, Sid Bully Cat?